All right, everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, the show where we sit down with people shaping the future of clean tech, smart infrastructure, and intentional living. Today's guest is Jason Edwards, founder of Ijube Solar, a Florida-based company that's doing solar differently. While a lot of companies talk about sustainability, Jason and his team are obsessed with removing friction from the process, delivering fast installs, clear communication, and real value to homeowners who want to make the leap to solar without the usual pain points. In this episode, we're going to talk about how his company is redefining the solar customer experience, the hidden policy and permitting issues that are slowing everything down, why energy independence means more in 2025 than ever before, and how smart, mission driven marketing is helping small players outmaneuver the big guys. Jason, it's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to discuss solar. It's one of my passions, and it's why I transitioned to alternative energy, renewable energy. But yeah, great to be here.
That's fantastic. No, we're happy that you're here. And I kind of want to jump straight into it. And I noticed that your company's tagline is going solar shouldn't be a hassle. Just give us a bit of a background on what inspired that and what the whole mission is.
Okay, yeah, I'll just give you a brief rundown. My background: I've worked in the energy industry my entire career, electrical engineering background, but once I got to the homeowner phase and the residential user phase, that's where I saw the most difficulty. Of course, permitting licensing exists all throughout, but it's made easy all the way up until the point of homeowners taking command over how they use their energy. And after transitioning, it was like, I don't understand. Like, I do understand, but I don't understand why there's so many people and processes in between homeowners and going solar, taking command of their energy usage and making their overall lives more sustainable. So that was really my
Exactly.
focus, when I started the company, is to focus in on making it the most painless process that we can come up with and make it easy as possible for the homeowner.
That's amazing. And that process I noticed has three stages. You have origination, realization, and then closeout. Can you explain and break down that process for those who maybe aren't familiar?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just the process and the way it naturally goes. Any form of vision that happens in the origination stage, we have tools, we have technical aspects and technical tools that we can use, but it's all about the original vision. And this is what a lot of salesmen, saleswomen that go out to the homeowners directly, this is what they do. They have to paint the picture because they're already receiving the energy from the utility. So we have to paint the picture of what it means for them to be more energy independent, for them to have a role and actually impact how they use their energy, where they get their energy from, and how it can benefit them, most importantly. And that's the origination stage. It is us with our experience, our background, coming into the homeowner, and painting the picture of how it will be beneficial, giving them a long-term idea of what it would look like, giving them a rough layout in terms of their system, potential, the layout, designs, all the different aspects that we can integrate into it based on their needs. And then we go from there. And that's where, after we have the vision and we match it up with the client's expectations and what they want us to do, we essentially just use our vehicle to run their project through the future stages. And once we have our origination stage, that informs the rest of the project. That's why we focus so deeply on asking the follow-up questions, asking what type of issues they actually have, instead of focusing on just, closing the deal, getting the sale, and getting out the door. It's like, what is your vision? Like, after you understand and after we present it to you, how do you want it to look? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And that informs how we design it. And that's where we get to the realization stage of how we make it a reality. And that's when we talk to our engineers, we come up with designs, we talk to our vendors and see what panel is the right one, what design is the right one for their layout, their exposure, everything else. Homeowners are not going to have the time, the knowledge, and, necessarily the ability to be able to go through and learn the entire industry, after a hour long sales pitch. They're not going to have the time to go back and do that.
Exactly.
So there has to be a level of trust that's established. And the way that we do that, we carry our client with us throughout the entire process. We negotiate on their behalf with our vendors in terms of what materials make sense. Now, tariffs have been a reality ever since in the solar industry since about 2015, 2016. So it's not that we're making an adjustment. It's just the level to which the tariffs are now impacts how we choose. And, okay, well, if you have a locally manufactured panel in the US, you're going to avoid a large portion of those additional tariffs that have been added on in the past, decade or so. So,
Exactly.
when we take it from there, and then the realization stage, the physical materials, getting them on site, getting them installed, or getting inspections called, adjusting to any unforeseen challenges. Often, especially in states like Florida, homeowners are in the process of making multiple adjustments to their property. And then also with our corporate clients, they're also in the process of, quarterly based upgrades or transitions throughout their own company.
Exactly.
So managing those changes is really when our expertise comes into play, you know. And then close out, that's the stage national and large regional organizations kind of miss most of the time. And that's what we're starting to realize. My time when I was at Palmetto, I was exposed to the after portion, which is going to be the
Mm-hmm.
largest portion of the system's life, is the maintenance, the support, if there's any warranty claims, anything that nature, that's going to be for the majority of the lifetime of the system, So the
Mm-hmm.
closeout stage is extremely important because we have to close the permits. We have to, in order for the homeowner to move on to other projects, we have to close the permit. We have to do the inspections. We have to do the follow-ups if there's a batteries, any level of storage that's involved, any
Mm-hmm.
integration, hybrid systems that may include geothermal, may include hydropower, wind power, any of those other factors. That's our closeout stage, and that's really where we put our signature on it. So it's painless for them moving forward, and they can just get to their return on investment.
Amazing. No, I love that. And I think the process is such an important part. I mean, every company has its own way, and being able to really deal with, the challenges and the things that kind of come up is where I find, like you mentioned, a lot of companies fall short. They don't know how to problem solve, or that's when they end up outsourcing a lot of things. So I think that leads into the next idea is what's one misconception you regularly have to clear up for new or first-time solar buyers?
I think the biggest thing, because of the way it's sold as if it's standalone and independent of the grid. And that's the aim. That's the focus. I think that's going to be it's going to be mandatory going towards the future. Is going to have to be standalone and independent. But the way it's been sold is as if that capacity is already there. And that capacity is there, but it also has to be purchased. It also has to be packaged in and included with the overall design. So many homeowners are instructed and confused when it comes to how it operates when power does go out. It doesn't operate on its own for the majority of the systems that don't have storage. It doesn't operate on its own. So that is the number one biggest misconception that I've had to clear up for clients in the past, for the organizations I've managed, because, it's a common sales tactic. It's a common question that's avoided,
Mm-hmm.
when a sale is made. So a lot of what operations management for me has been is really focusing on giving them the real process, versus the vision, that was painted for them. It's getting them in touch with the reality of how things work, the timelines, the financial expectations. Like, there are loan expiration dates in terms of like when the loan is still viable, and financial situations, financial circumstances, employment circumstances change over time. So, a lot of homeowners call in and they have that sense of urgency, but the building departments don't have that sense of urgency,
Exactly.
and that's really where we come into play, because we have to be the ones to make sure the steps of the process is lined out and as clear as possible, so we don't have those extreme delays where we're waiting for permitting to get back from us just for them to reject a design, that's not up to the latest code. We have to have the experience and the advanced knowledge to know, okay, they adopted this level of code, so when we design the system, we need to design it this way. And when we order the plans and submit the plans, get everything stamped, get all the approvals, the NOC signed, everything else, everything is packaged properly the first time. So we don't have to do revisions and don't have to double back around and wait for follow-up times and delays, due to understaffing and personnel issues at the local AHJs, and that's what I'm saying is a most effective thing is just to get it right from the beginning. And then if there's any banter and back and forth, we just can respond with a quick response and it doesn't require resubmission.
That's amazing. With these processes, I guess, have you seen any progress at the municipal or the state level in recent years? Is it getting any better or is it more the same?
Yeah, you know what happened during the pandemic? A lot of the digital systems were prioritized, especially in the state of Florida, and it was mandated that the jurisdictions had to transition from, many were still on paper only submissions. So it had to transition from paper submissions, email submissions, and they had to transition to have a full online portal where everything can be submitted, the full permit can be submitted and reviewed and properly processed online. And due to the restrictions that came out during the pandemic, it accelerated everything. And that was really when solar in Florida kind of took off. A lot of other larger commercial projects were put on hold due to, physical presence, like mandates. Like it required a lot of people to be in small enclosed areas, so it kind of shut down a lot of those larger operations. So solar kind of had a little peak during that period of time, and it made everything change. So it really made everything change. So the transition to online, one of the worst jurisdictions to do it in before was Miami-Dade County. But now, after the mandatory transition to online, they have one of the most effective and one of the fastest processes, in Central to South Florida. Of course, Orlando and Tampa, they've had this, those have had time to perfect their strategy, so they turn things around very fast. But in terms of South Florida, Miami-Dade County, they have a very fast process now. It's understood. They respond faster if there's an issue on plans, designs, anything. They turn around and kick it back so you can actually get everything done and get it back to them in a reasonable time frame. And I think that's really the level of progress that I've seen.
That's amazing. And when you're seeing a lot of progress, it's not only, I think, at the process level, but also technology-wise. I mean, and a thing that we see a lot is battery storage. Would you say that battery storage is becoming more common in your installs? Is it a want or kind of a need at this?
Yeah, it's mandatory essentially going forward. Like right now, the grid is still stable. The grid is still stable, but the whole nationalization and large or regionalization or large national organizations controlling large areas of the country in terms of utility distribution, that causes serious issues because in order for them to respond, they have to move the entire organization. Even if they just buy it up and manage it as like a conglomerate, they still have to move the whole entire organization to respond to the needs of the local population. So the grid is not as strong everywhere as it is in some of the newer developed more newly developed areas of the country. Areas, especially like on the East Coast, there's going to be more of an impact of aging infrastructure because the equipment is going to be outdated. If something does blow, it automatically, results in a, main panel upgrade, or even a service upgrade. There are multiple layers of the grid that have outdated technology that is still functional and active that cannot truly be decommissioned because it's not part of the primary network. So those are kind of the challenges in energy overall, because there is literally layers in any major city, any metropolis, any growing, booming city that sees any level of growth. There's going to be basically layers. So they're going to be built out from one thing, and the new areas are basically just going to be tapped in and patched into existing infrastructure. And that's the true challenge. So storage is a way to localize your power and to be able to actually directly have access to your power if anything happens to the grid. Because everything is not a full outage. Everything is not a full power outage. It could be a limited or rotational type power reduction, where they may have to change the frequency of the power being delivered or have to shift the way that the energy is being produced on their end.
Mm-hmm.
And that may impact, electronics within the home, microelectronics, things of that nature, which are very, very sensitive to frequency fluctuations. So my time working for the utility company, most people don't even get exposed to those type of things, but having that time and that experience in that industry expose a whole other layer about how power is purchased and redistributed. And because of the ITC, you can purchase power in California, purchase power, in Maine or Pennsylvania, and at the utility level, and distribute it to people that are local to you, instead of ramping up peaker plants and things like that. But
Hmm.
for the homeowner, that cost is passed on to the homeowner. So their cost
Exactly.
naturally increases over time. So the only way to really offset that is to have storage and integrate storage and factor it into your energy plan design for the next, 10, 15, 20 years
Exactly.
as the grid further decays and further moves into obsolescence,
Hmm.
into its ineffective phase, essentially.
Exactly. And I kind of want to touch on that also because how do you help customers think beyond the upfront cost and understand the long-term value of solar?
Yeah, that's really the best thing about the tools that have been generated. I'd say really in the last decade to 15 years, there have been so many tools that have been developed that could actually model this out and give us the opportunity to give a financial prediction, and then also give a energy prediction, and then also give us a model for energy costs over time. It was very conservative before. 2 to 3% increases in energy costs per year over 15 to 30 year period. With the modeling, but now having seen utilities in the last 5 years increase, in some areas increase energy costs almost 25% in 5 years, and spike up, especially like Florida, and see energy costs spike up, 15% in a single year. Like that's significant. So you can't
It
say
is.
that a stable model is a conservative model anymore. You know, there are more international players that are investing in formerly U.S. owned companies.
Hmm.
So they're going to push and be more aggressive on their return on investment as an organization globally. So that's going to be passed down to these corporations, that may have once been, U.S. owned and operated, and now they're part of an international conglomerate. So they're going to have more aggressive timelines in their returns. Those are the things that we have to understand. It's not a closed off environment, despite what politics may suggest. It's not a closed off environment.
Hmm.
International investment firms are a reality. They've bought up some of the larger organizations that we believe to be U.S. organizations that hasn't really existed for a long time. Just like the auto industry had to make a shift in terms of how they did things, what they focused on, how they focused on material usage and production cost, and where they stage material, we have to have that same regional look and take a regional look
Hmm.
and a local look at how we store our energy, because energy storage is one of the most inefficient aspects of the energy generation industry. It's the number one problem worldwide is how do you
Hmm.
store the energy when you generate it. So the best way is to put that power and give the homeowner that power to be able to store it locally,
Hmm.
or microgridding. We can have micro storage, and micro generation, where it's a community that's producing their own energy.
Hmm.
So all of these things have resulted in positive policy over the last decade or so, but it needs to be more aggressive.
Fair
Honestly,
enough.
in order to match the pace of grid decay and grid obsolescence, it needs to be more aggressive.
Exactly. And I know that you can always see that in the way that things are evolving, right? Like I know that there's a certain rate of decay that you need to keep up with. So you need to scale your business fast enough. And
Yep.
I guess, I mean, from my perspective, you're clearly building for scale. So how do you make sure the customer first mindset stays, strong and really upfront as you grow?
Yeah, that is why the focus has to be local and at largest regional. It like beyond that, it's too much to maintain, it's too much to manage, it's too much to try and manipulate, too many different numbers to manage and keep in balance because return timeframes for a company are different based on what region that you operate in. So if you have a local to state level focus for your company, it allows you to be engaged with the local clients and a local clientele. And you don't kind of get distracted about a lot of the shifts and adjustments that happen in other regions of the country because your local base is being taken care of. You know, your local base is being direct, like you're building your business around your local base. So you are structuring yourself so you can respond to the people and service the people where you are. That's really the only way. The large model, it looks good on paper. You know, it looks good for the larger financial organizations that want to be lenders and operate, you know, nationally. But it has been proven to not be sustainable and to not be beneficial. Like there's spurts of productive quarters and productive years, but for a long term financial stability model, those companies are falling apart because they're spread too thin, you
Fair
know.
enough.
And that's just the reality of it. You know, the reality of it is we need to focus on the local population. We need to focus on the local natural occurring resources that are where we are and use the energy that we generate in our region more appropriately with the way of life of the region, you know.
That makes sense. I like that a lot. And I think it can be overwhelming at some time to really think that way. But I think that's the industry as a whole. There's so much information, there's so much technology, there's so much, to really take in, especially when scaling and growing the business so that you're able, so that your way of being able to kind of keep that and be conscious of the way that you're doing it, not to go too fast, but also be able to steadily go forwards is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I like to kind of move it over to a different kind of segment because speaking of being, overwhelming for, even businesses, but consumers, what's working the best for you in terms of outreach and lead generation? How are you getting in front of people? How are you getting them to fully understand your vision and how you're really coming around the things that the business is getting towards?
The thing about it is everything is kind of in play and like it's kind of up in the air right now in terms of how we communicate with the end user, whether it's a homeowner or whether it's a business. A lot of the traditional means of direct networking and reach out and this person introduce someone to this person to this person to this organization.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those means are no longer in place. So a lot of that is actually being redeveloped in terms of how we communicate. Of course, word of mouth is the number one most productive and effective form of
Exactly.
referrals and generation because once you have proof of concept that people have something physical that they can see, natural local competitive nature of being neighbors, people are going to want to have what other people that they live around have. It's just human
Exactly.
nature. So once the vision is created or once we service people, like a lot of our work has been service, has been detach reset, has been stepping in where the larger organizations that have now gone out of business many have abandoned their clients, but that doesn't stop things that happen at a manufacturer level, with the RMA process or with battery maintenance, with annual maintenance, with annual review, annual system checking and troubleshooting. A lot of this is not it's not fully in the hands of the homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel it should be. Like there's a mandate for many of these systems to be maintained by installers, who have the knowledge and the background of how to use of how to work with the equipment. So ease of use, and that was one of the things I learned from watching the China market, the international market, the German market, is the ease of use of the technology that they roll out, especially in a residential space.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much that needs to be done there physically. Once it's verified that the system is installed properly, a lot of that maintenance can be done remotely, via backdoor channels and things of that nature. So a lot of those service level things have been removed, in an international space. But
Mm-hmm.
in this space, there's still like a lag phase, because it's not nationally incentivized in terms of like a feed-in tariff nationally or something like that. Though
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that really accelerate how rapid technology is rolled out. in how rapidly, because basically it's like customer complaints are really what pushes technology. It's the errors, it's the
Exactly.
missteps, it's the aggravations that come with it. But that's really what advances technology is when errors are spotted and it naturally grows and develops over time. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's really like the best thing that I'm saying is really like the service aspect because like many companies did not build it into their plan.
Hmm.
So service leads to, like I said, detached resets. Roof expiration windows are shorter than the solar equipment itself. So that's
Hmm.
going to push and drive new opportunities. Those who are just like naturally engaged in the industry and the technology itself, they always want to upgrade. They always want the newest, battery system that comes out, replace the old
Hmm.
ones, just because of efficiency levels and they read up and they study, especially in the prepper community, you're going to see a lot of that, where they're constantly staying up on the technology and advancements and trying to keep, quote unquote, big brother out of the mix of them and their energy and, everything else. So, I mean, those are all the different streams that push projects and people, to us. So we have to be more versatile. We're smaller, so we have to be more versatile. We can't be fixed
Hmm.
into, and fixed and limited in terms of what we respond to.
Hmm. That's amazing. I like the idea that, obviously referrals are always going to be the greatest thing, and word of mouth, you can't beat that. But are you leaning on like digital tools, like things like Facebook ads, Google ads, maybe supplementing the referrals and the word of mouth?
Yeah, yeah, that's the best. That's the best thing that I'm seeing. That's what I mentioned earlier about the tools that are being developed
Hmm.
because they're not only being developed in one phase of the project life and a project cycle. They're being developed to be active from start to finish. So it includes, digital advertising, digital marketing, digital communication management, filtering out spam, filtering out, distractions and things of that nature, and infiltrators, bots, things of that nature that just want to get inside of, said organization. All of those are factors, especially now with the, digital ransom age, really taking off. Those digital products that are actually vetted well, designed well, those really help us the most. I've used several, and I'm not really going to not name drop, but I've used several of the largest ones in the smaller app based cell phone interface apps. Those are the most effective. They're not as heavy. The other ones are kind of built as like a information gathering database for like the old school sales tactics and everything. But now with the infusion and the cross platform merging of, quote unquote metadata
Hmm.
in the way that's being turned around to offer other products that may be also that the homeowner may also be interested in. It is being used in multiple industries. Those tools that are based around mobile devices are the most effective. It was another a couple companies that I discussed those tools with. But yeah, those are the most effective, and they can actually be built on top of existing, client management software platforms. But that's really the wave of the future. Everybody's going to be doing everything digitally from their cell phones and very little communication. Especially with
Hmm.
the transhumanism age emerging, there's going to be more integrated technology into biology. So there's going to be mobile devices that are integrated within each human that actually goes down that pathway. So that is really the way that the technology is being developed, is so it can be lightweight, not cumbersome, and just really ease of access, easy use, 7 or 8 steps and your project is on the way, 2 3 steps and your project is, through final inspection and completed, maybe one signature required. Beyond that, and the project process is done all from a mobile device or from a implanted device.
Exactly.
That's just where things are going.
I love it.
The lighter the better, man.
That's amazing. And I think just to kind of wrap up, let's leave people with a simple piece of advice. If someone's listening and thinking about going solar, but kind of feels overwhelmed or unsure on who to trust, what would you say to help them get started, with confidence?
Yeah, I mean, Reach out to us, of course, because we also do consultations. It's not just, selling solar for me. This is part of my vision and mission. So putting power back in the hands of the people is really my focus, has been my focus since I realized how many other hands are in the mix of everything. But the simplest thing I would recommend for people to do is, especially larger organizations, is use a alternative energy consultant. That will cut down a lot of things that are being oversold and overdesigned, and it'll keep you abreast of the tariff situation, because there are certain exemptions for the solar industry, specifically in the U.S. When it extends to ground mounts and things like that. So that would be more beneficial for large organizations to go in a direction of a ground mount versus rooftop,
Hmm.
due to the tariff relief in those specific areas. So time frame and timing, we see like over the last month, now suddenly the incentive tax credit is not going to be there. So that means that, there needs to be alternative designs in terms of how we get things done. So using a consultant, reaching out to a consultant for especially larger organizations, that's going to be the most effective thing. For homeowners, the best thing for them is really to do a consultation, sit and talk with the engineers at local solar installers. A lot of that they'll do for free just to get contact information and communicate and get you on their radar. So you can really just call around and vet the same way people car shop, the same way people shop for appliances. Look at, YouTube videos, look at, online videos, online forums, sign up for those type of things, and just get like background information and ask direct questions, like specific direct questions about what it's going to look like for you. you know, Not somebody in California, not somebody in Canada, not somebody in Germany. What is it specifically going to look like for you in the city that you live in? And, anything that you can take advantage of, or anything that you need to do to prepare yourself for, even if you have to get the local financing through a credit union or something like that, through a home improvement loan versus, a national lender. Those are the things that will position you better, just like when you're buying any other service or any other product, you know.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jason. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate the way you and your team not only are delivering clean energy, but delivering it with clarity, care, and especially with community in mind. So, if you want to learn more, get in touch with Jason's team, head over to ijubesolar.com. That's IJUBE solar.com. You can also subscribe to Off the Grid on the Record on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts for more conversations with people rethinking how we power the world. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. And thanks again, Jason. Of
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the time.
course, of course. Take care, everybody.